Come in, come in. Tonight I want to talk to you about a story you think you already know. Salem, 1692. Witches, hysteria, tragedy. You studied it in school. You have seen the films. And you have almost certainly heard about the burning. The burning that never actually happened. Because this was never really about witches. It was about land, about money, about old grudges wearing new and terrifying disguises, and about a community so fractured that when panic arrived, it moved through Salem the way fire moves through a house that has been soaking in something flammable for years. The tragedy of Salem was not that witches were real. It was that fear became more powerful than truth. My name is Barnaby Ellison Thatch. I am a historian. I tell stories about people the official record would prefer you forgot. That, I find, is where things get interesting. The year is 1692, Salem Village, Massachusetts. And I want you to notice something immediately. This is not Salem Town. These are not the same place. That distinction will turn out to be rather important. In January, strange things begin happening in the household of Samuel Parris, the village minister. His daughter Betty and his niece Abigail Williams exhibit behavior no one can explain. Trembling, screaming at invisible things. A physician named William Griggs examines the girls and delivers the only diagnosis his world has given him. He concludes they are bewitched. 3 women are accused almost immediately. Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Parris household, Sarah Good, a destitute beggar, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman already entangled in a property dispute. All 3 were, in the language of social power, utterly expendable. Tituba confessed, under what pressure we can only guess. In confessing, she described red cats, yellow birds, a tall man in dark clothing, and named others. The accusations did not stop. By May, a special court had been established. More than 150 people imprisoned. 19 hanged, 1 man pressed to death beneath heavy stones. The panic lasted roughly 1 year. Then, with the same bewilderment with which it began, it stopped. The mythology surrounding Salem has been maintained with what I can only describe as suspicious enthusiasm. 3 myths, quickly dispatched. The witches were burned at the stake. They were not. 19 people were hanged on a rocky hillside called Gallows Hill. 1 man, Giles Corey, 80 years old, was pressed to death beneath stones over 2 days. His last recorded words were, "More weight," which is either an act of extraordinary defiance or the most devastating thing anyone has ever said to a magistrate. This was a crisis only about women. It was not. Men were accused, convicted, and executed. Giles Corey, his wife Martha, the Reverend George Burroughs, John Proctor, and finally, the one that matters most, that this was all just superstition. That is the comfortable version. But if superstition alone had driven the trials, the accusations would have been random. They were not random. They followed very specific, very traceable lines, and we are going to follow them. Salem Village and Salem Town were worlds apart. Salem Town was a prosperous coastal trading hub, merchants, shipping, money, influence. Salem Village was agricultural, isolated, economically fragile. Its farmers paid taxes to the town and received very little in return. This is not a footnote. This is the engine. Salem Village families had been fighting over land for years. Property lines contested, inheritances disputed, neighbor against neighbor over inches of soil. Those disputes went to court and produced legal records. And when we map the witch trial accusations onto those land dispute records, something rather remarkable emerges. The pattern of accusation follows the pattern of dispute. The Putnam family, among the most aggressive accusers in the trials, were involved in multiple property conflicts with families whose members ended up charged with witchcraft. The witch trials provided a mechanism, a socially acceptable, God-endorsed mechanism, for settling scores that couldn't be settled any other way. You could not accuse your neighbor of stealing your father's field, but you could testify that you had seen their shape tormenting you in the night. There was also the church. Samuel Parris had arrived into a village already divided over who should lead it. Many who had opposed his ministry were among the first to be accused. Accusation, in other words, was ministry by other means. Add to all of this a colony without a stable government, a brutal frontier war to the north, and the sincere Puritan belief that Satan was an active force in daily life. And then drop one frightened minister's daughter on a parlor floor. What you get is not superstition. What you get is kindling meeting a match. Tituba is worth a moment, because she is almost always misrepresented. She was an enslaved woman with no social standing, no legal protection, no advocate, and no freedom, in a room with magistrates who had already decided she was guilty. Her confession was not a spiritual admission, it was survival. A confessed witch who cooperated was more useful to the court than a dead one. She survived. Many who refused to confess did not. The court also accepted what it called spectral evidence, testimony that a person's spirit had appeared to a witness in a dream and caused harm. The accused could have an airtight alibi for every waking moment. It did not matter. Because the spectre, visible only to the accuser, had acted on the devil's behalf, that evidence cannot be verified, cannot be cross-examined, cannot be disproven. Several ministers identified this problem immediately, but the court moved fast, and when courts move fast, the first casualty is always the nuance that might slow them down. By autumn of 1692, the accusations had crept too high, reaching the wife of the governor himself, which concentrated official minds quite dramatically. The court was dissolved. A new one established, rejecting spectral evidence entirely. Most of the remaining accused were acquitted or pardoned. In 1711, nearly 20 years later, Massachusetts formally reversed the convictions. Families of the executed received compensation. The total paid to all 19 families, £578 and 12 shillings. Not per person. Total. What I find most haunting is not the inadequacy of that sum. It is how quickly Salem reached for the same explanation it had always used. The apologies framed the trials as mass delusion, Satan's deception. The invisible hand, not the land dispute, not the court that admitted dreams as evidence, not the minister whose enemies ended up on trial, the devil. Convenient, isn't he? 19 people were hanged here. One man was pressed to death. Several others died in prison, waiting for a trial that never came. They were farmers, wives, an elderly man who refused to play a game he knew was rigged. They were, in the end, people, with land arguments and church fees and cold winters and the ordinary furniture of ordinary lives. They were also the scapegoats for a community that had run out of other explanations for its suffering. The Salem Witch Trials are not a story about witches. They never were. They are a story about what happens when fear becomes the operating system of an entire community. When communities under pressure manufacture visible enemies. When accusation becomes a weapon. When legal mechanisms admit evidence that cannot be examined. The legal architecture changes. The human pattern does not. Until next time, keep your questions sharp, because the truth is rarely where we're told to look. I'm Barnaby Ellison Thatch, and this has been History Unsealed.
Brought to you by Inception Point AI. Subscribe, like, and comment for more.